presentation is of course going to be more or less entirely in English. In Sri Lanka, of course, Sinhalese and Tamil are both official languages. In Canada, it is English and French. Majority of us will be using English. Occasionally, I might summarize some of the more important points in French, just since we are a bilingual country. Now, in Canada, there has been a great interest in local Canadian politics about genocide. And this local interest is going to be built up and pushed to the federal level as well. Let's look at this local interest. And what is very interesting is that although there was an official commission that had studied Canada's Aboriginal peoples genocide, which included the loss of millions of lives, as you can see from this graph, there has been a big 5 million Aboriginal people had dropped to less than 1 million. And now, of course, in the 20th century, things have improved because of the increasing recognition of the harm that was done to the Aboriginal people. However, it is not this Canadian genocide that is being talked about. It's an alleged Tamil genocide in faraway Sri Lanka. And this has been particularly focused in the Ontario legislature, which is studying Bill 104 to pass a Tamil genocide education bill week. This bill is proposing to teach the children about what happened in Sri Lanka, an alleged genocide, and spend a week of their academic time every year to bring this story of a genocide to them. Why is there such a great interest in an elite Tamil genocide? Is the issue of a genocide within the purview of local politics? No. Has Tamil genocide been established by an official commission of inquiry? No. In fact, the NDP human rights critic asked for such an inquiry, so it has not been established. Is the elite Tamil genocide more important locally than the Canadian Aboriginal genocide? No. Is the elite Tamil genocide a greater human rights issue than the Aboriginal genocide of millions? I don't think anyone will agree with that. So the Ontario Bill 104 has raised, so that the Ontario Bill, which has started in, of course, in Ontario, in a local provincial government, has raised much concern and consternation in Sri Lanka. I just want to draw your attention to Chandre Ferdinando's article in yesterday's newspaper, which was titled "Canadian Move to Legitimize Genocide Brought to Government Attention." In the pre-oration to the controversial Bill 104, it is alleged that 146,600 Tamils were killed in May 2000 alone. C'est-à-dire, M. Chandre Ferdinando, dans son article dans le journal Island, très important journal français, il a indiqué que le gouvernement canadien essaie de légitimiser le génocide, qui a aucun fond, il n'y a pas eu une investigation. Donc, c'est ça c'est quelque chose qui a créé beaucoup d'intérêt en Sri Lanka. So in the Bill 104, alleged Tamil genocide, Bill 104 brings into Canada divisive politics that plagued Sri Lanka's ethnic harmony for decades. Bill 104 is actually an affront to the Aboriginal people of Canada, whose proven genocide deserves to be given recognition before any foreign genocides. We examine the alleged Tamil genocide using the views of Tamil politicians, intellectuals, journalists, and diplomats. C'est-à-dire, moi, je ne présente pas mes propres points de vue, je présente le point de vue des universitaires, des intellectuels et des politiciens tamouls nous voulons voir qu'est-ce qu'ils ont dit sur cette question. The Tamil National Alliance, which is the leading Tamil party, University Teachers for Human Rights in Jaffna, DBS Jayaraj, he is a well-known Toronto journalist, Sebastian Raslingam, a writer from Toronto. Then we will also look at what the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has said. We can look at WikiLeaks, look at what US diplomats have said, look at Marga Institute, look at what Lord Nasibi, who led an investigation very recently in the British House of Lords into the question of whether there has been a genocide or not and how many were killed. In Canada, by contrast, no such investigation has been made, but they are assuming that such a genocide has occurred and they are rushing to pass legislation. British House of Commons, British House of Lords made this investigation and did a very comprehensive investigation and gave some numbers. So I'm just going to rely on what other people, moderate Tamils, as well as diplomats have said to look at what we can say about genocide and what numbers we have. Let us look at how did the story of genocide come about. The first legalized attempt to legalize it came from what you might call a somewhat extreme side of Tamil politics. Mr. Vigneswaran, Chief Minister of the Northern Provincial Council. Northern Provincial Council is this part of Sri Lanka, which is the majority population here in this province is Tamil. So he moved that the government of Sri Lanka, successive governments since 1948, have committed acts of genocide against Tamils, and he wanted that investigated. So you see, he's not rushing to pass the bill. He wants it investigated. And he says it should be investigated by the United Nations and the International Criminal Court. So that is, you see, not an unreasonable position to take. If you believe that the genocide has been committed, let us say, let's investigate it. And however, Mr. Thanikasaram, the provincial minister for Scarborough, goes far beyond that. He claims far more than Mr. Vigneswaran and proposes Bill 104, which not only assumes that the genocide has been committed, but it now wants the Ministry of Education in Ontario to proceed to teach this as a part of accepted history, even without investigation. So you see, some people will say Mr. Vigneswaran is an extremist, but no, he has actually said, let's investigate this, which already shocked most of the historians and writers in Sri Lanka, but nevertheless, he has a legitimate democratic position to say that. But Mr. Thanikasaran has not proposed an investigation. He wants education. He wants history. Now, what do the Tamil leaders, so Mr. Vigneswaran said, let's investigate. What was the reaction of the leading Tamil political parties? Mr. Vigneswaran's claim of a genocide is not accepted by most other Tamil leaders, intellectuals. So the Canadian legislators are even more extreme. They rush to accept the Tamil genocide whilst ignoring the Aboriginal genocide. So let's look at the main Tamil political party, which is known as the Tamil National Alliance, TNA. The spokesman for the Tamil National Alliance, very distinguished lawyer, presidential counsel, Mr. Sumantiram. Mr. Sumantiram, the TNA spokesman, when Mr. Vigneswaran proposed that there has been a genocide in Sri Lanka and that this should be investigated, the TNA spokesman, Mr. Sumantiram, claimed that this claim of a genocide is foolish. And you can see the full interview in Tamilnet, Saturday, 19th September 2015. So the moment he said this, of course, you see, it is in politics, there are moderate people and there are extremist people. The extremists immediately labeled Mr. Sumantiran as a Turogi. Turogi, as you can see the Tamil word, traitor. And he is a traitor. Why? I think he just told the truth. But the truth is not acceptable. And it requires tremendous courage in the Tamil politics to go against the LTTE Islamist claim. Or in fact, it was echoed even in India. The extremist groups immediately rose against Mr. Sumantiran. Tirumugan Gandhi, in May 17th, he is the leader of the May 17th movement for Tamil Nadu, from Tamil Nadu. He said Mr. Sumantiran was shocking the Tamil psyche. So you see, going against genocide is not easy, and we can understand why Mr. Thanigasaram is obliged to push this line of thinking. And then, so he's Mr. Sumantiran, who is a distinguished lawyer, said within the definition that is accepted by the world today, this is not genocide. That is, you can again see in Tamil Net 19 September 2015. So almost 4 years before Mr. Thanigasaram's bill, this has already been rejected by the Tamil political leaders in Sri Lanka. And that's not all. Let us look at what the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has to say. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights very specifically said it hasn't satisfied the test of genocide. He said it when he was asked at the press conference. And then again, a report is found in the Tamil Net. And of course, it was reported in other newspapers. But if I quote a Sinhalese newspaper or a national newspaper, the Tamil lobby will say, oh, this is Sinhalese government. I'm therefore quoting mainly from the Tamil Net. You see, I'm quoting only intellectuals from the Tamil media and Tamil leaders to support, to point out that Tamil genocide is not accepted by educated Tamils and leaders of Tamil political parties. Genocide, so the genocide bill, genocide proposed in Bill 104 stands already rejected by Zaid Al-Hussein, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, already in 2015. C'est-à-dire, le Haut Commissariat, Monsieur Zaid Al-Hussein, il a déjà rejeté cette histoire de génocide de Tamil. C'était fait en 1915, 4 ans avant de Bill 104. Anand Sangari, not Mr. Barry Anand Sangari, our MP in Canada, his father, leader of the Tamil United Liberation Front. He does not indict the Sri Lankan government. Instead, he indicts the LTTE for mass killings of injured cadre. Mr. Sangari, addressing the annual convention that Tamil United Liberation Front in 2008, December, that is only a few months before the end of the war, he revealed, that's in the last stages of the war, he revealed the LTT's mass killings of its own cadre. At this address, he gave details of how the LTT would get rid of its dead or injured, he'd get rid of its injured cadre because they regarded the injured as a liability, and also they wanted to blame the Sri Lankan government of killing their cadre, so they got rid of them. And so who is killing? Not the army, according to Mr. Anand Sangari. So let us also look at what Tamil journalists, DBS Jairaj, he lives in Toronto, but every week he used to write a column, especially covering the war. So he said that he gave examples. For instance, he gave 2 cases during the ceasefire. I mean, of course, he has given hundreds of cases every week, but I'm just taking 2 cases in the 2 weeks, in the weeks when the ceasefire, so were approved by the Sri Lankan government. He says that the LTTE positioned its artillery and mortar assets near or in the middle of civilian concentrations. These acts were confirmed by a range of media outlets, including Reuters in India, who had his representative in the WANI in February 2009. So you see, contrary to what is claimed, this was not a war without witnesses. There were Reuters reporters, there was Reddy from the newspaper Hindu, and many other people. So he says that they quoted the 74-year-old Catholic nun as claiming the LTT fired from close to civilians. We had objected, but that didn't work. The LTT wanted to create many victims, expecting foreign intervention. That was what was said by an old Catholic nun. And that was reported by Mr. DBS Jairaj in one of his columns. And there are many other reports by Jairaj. Here's another one, where he says that the LTT wanted to create a humanitarian disaster to blame the army and also bring foreign intervention. So this humanitarian disaster is what has now been claimed as genocide by people like Mr. Vijay Thanigasalam. So Mr. Jairaj says that the 59th Division of the army was to move north from Karaichakkudirirppu. The LTT resorted to a cruel and inhuman stratagem by moving the civilians into this coastal strip in large numbers. It was an inhumane human deterrent placed by the LTT. The security forces were compelled to abandon the original maneuver. So you will find, if you go through DBS Jairaj's columns during the time of the war, every week, and he will have reports of this sort showing that the army actually tried to minimize as far as possible civilian deaths. Let's go to the University Teachers for Human Rights, JAFNA. These are Tamil intellectuals. One of the leading well-known person is Professor Rajan Hool. So Professor Rajan Hool also says, these again show that he gives the number of examples in their report about the war. I haven't, of course, it's a massive document of 50 or 60 pages. I can't report. There are many examples. He says, for instance, that the LTT used to send teams, and each team of 6 people had to recruit 30 conscripts. Who wrote, if they fail, they are subject to often to lethal punishment. Ganesh Pille was, and other civilians were advancing towards the army, line Iruddumadu. So the army knew that they were coming along the road. The army was careful not to shell the road. While the LTT used snipers to kill, they wanted to kill the people, prevent the people from taking refuge in the army. They wanted to kill the army. These again show that the army took significant efforts to minimize civilian losses, while the LTT sought to increase civilian losses during the last 6 months of the Elam War. Please note that in all these slides, I have not said anything of my own. I have merely reported to you what Tamil intellectuals and also leaders of the Tamil political parties have said. Now, on the other hand, in Canada, we have a completely different situation. While the Tamil National Alliance spokesman says there is no genocide, in Canada, we have the Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown declaring May 18 as the city's Remembrance Day of Tamil Genocide with no investigation. Jagmeet Singh, leader of the federal NDP. Now you would expect the federal leader to be far more careful and circumspect before he makes a grave accusation. No, he doesn't. He rushes in. He says, Sikhs have endured similar tragedies, including a genocide in 1984, and continued oppression by the Indian government, like you have faced with Sri Lanka government. So you see, he just equates genocide, an elite genocide in Sri Lanka to an elite genocide in in India. Now, I don't know if Canadian government has recognized a Sikh genocide in India. That I'm not going to discuss here. But this is another assumption that he makes. I mean, he could have said that there has been state terror on the part of the Sri Lankan government, especially during the first and second Elam wars against the Tamils, and that they have undergone much suffering. But he cannot claim that there was a genocide in the last stages of the war, because Elam war was very different from any of the previous wars. Jagmeet Singh is wrong. As said by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, as said by Mr. Sumantiran, the spokesman for the TNA, as said by Mr. Anand Sangari, father of Gary Anand Sangari of Canada, and he is the leader of the United Liberation Front, Tamil United Liberation Front in Sri Lanka. The same thing has been said, as I said, by the human rights teachers of the University of Jaffna and veteran journalists like Jayraj. So why and how can Mr. Jagmeet Singh overrule all these people and make this statement? Well, I mean, there must be political reasons for neglecting the truth. Canadian lawmakers like Jagmeet Singh has made unsubstantiated assumptions, conveniently made no investigation of what happened in Sri Lanka for political advantage, or maybe lack of awareness. But then a leader of a political party has a vast amount of research, of resources, research groups, and so on. So he research support, so there is no excuse for him to make this statement. Ethnic Tamil MPs like Vijay Thanigasalam are on a different category from Jagmeet Singh. They are subject to enormous pressure from Tamil organizations who are Islamist and separatist. These organizations have funding capacity, organizational capacity, and they actually look for retribution instead of reconciliation. Remember that Mr. Thanigasalam won by some 900 votes in his electorate. So he has to keep his ethnic vote, even the extreme fringe. Let's come to various estimates of civilian death toll in the 2009, because that's a crucial thing. I mean, Mr. Thanigasalam, for instance, Vijay Thanigasalam, in his pre-oration to the Bill 104, claimed 146,769. Remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a number given to 6 decimal figures, 6 significant figures. Anyone who is a scientist or a statistician will immediately say there should be error bars. You don't give any statistic to 6 significant figures. That shows you don't know what you are doing. If he gave it as 147,000 plus or minus 1,000, then that is the right way to report numbers. Lord Nesaby, the most comprehensive study so far, comes to a startlingly different conclusion. He says the British House of Lords study 2008, most comprehensive study so far, had 5,000 to 7,000 only, and not this vast number. The US State Department reported the Congress 77,000, and that was done in 2009. And how do we know this? This came out through WikiLeaks, and I haven't put the WikiLeaks reference here, but we have it. And I think it was also reported in The Guardian at the time in UK. The number is 77,000. And interestingly enough, in 2009, there were representatives of the UN in Sri Lanka desk of the UN. And these representatives also sent various diplomatic dispatches. These dispatches have also been revealed through WikiLeaks and other documents. And that number, I have rounded it up. It's about the same as, it was slightly less than this number, I think. So, but it's like the US Department. They later revised it to a somewhat higher number, but the correspondent of the Indian newspaper Reddy, who was in Wadi, claims that resolution, that extrapolation is wrong. So I stick to the number here. Now, the Department of Statistics official survey 2011-2014, that was in 17. They did a field study taking 3 years. So the Department of Statistics, this is Sri Lankan government study, they came out with 74,000. You see, that is their number. So all these numbers somehow tally. Now, Darusman, that is three-member panel headed by Darusman, was appointed by Ban Ki-moon, the then UN Secretary General, to report to him what they can say about the death numbers. Remember that this committee consisted of Yasmin Suka, who had been already writing extremely negative reports about Sri Lanka, extremely prejudiced, and maybe I believe that she was very instrumental in dealing with the numbers. And they claim that they have undisclosed witnesses whose claims they could not verify. And they say, well, according to all these letters we have got, we have 40,000. We estimate that there could have been 40,000. But they don't say that that is the number. They say that is a credible possibility and should be investigated. So these are the numbers that we have. I want to go back to see if I missed some view graphs, which I don't see here, because I had some view graphs from the American diplomats. I seem to have lost them in my I'm sorry about that. I don't seem to have it here, but let's go to so these are the numbers for the death toll that we have. These are, completely contrary to the amount. Now this is 5,000. 5,000 to 7,000. Is that a reasonable death toll for this? Is there an independent way of estimating or checking on this number rather than going through all these reports and all these diplomatic reports? What does the death toll mean? Deaths are from crossfire and mass killings by the LTTE, as evidenced by the University Teachers for Human Rights of Jaffna University, DBS Jairaj, TULF leader Ananda Sangari, and others. Given even the 7,000 death toll of Lord Nesabi over a period of 5 months, that means about 40 to 50 casualties are killed a day. Compare that with, for instance, the Iraq War. The British journal Lancet made a detailed study of the Iraq War, and they said 6,000, at least 600 a day, 1,000 in the Iraq War. Even a tenth of that. Also, you can read Shaminda Ferdinandu on the war on terror unleashed by the this number of 7,000 death toll is quite reasonable. As said by all the cited witnesses, the army even changed its tactics continually to avoid civilian losses. Finally, there were some 300,000 saved by the army. As you see in this picture, they are walking out from the clutches of the LTT, because the LTT had built a big earthen wall to corral up the 300,000 and preventing them from leaving. But the army breached the wall and allowed them to come out. And so the people are walking out into the army IDP camps or internally displaced people. They saved 300,000, and there were some 18,000 injured among them. Now, normally, if there is shelling, 1 or 2 people get killed, and as soon as they get killed, it doesn't mean that the people in the neighborhood that the shell also get injured. If for every 1 person killed, there may be 2 or 3 others injured. So therefore, we can expect that given the number of 18,000, 18,000 divided by about 2 or 3, say 2.5, should give you 7,200 deaths, which is quite consistent with the estimate by Lord Nesaby. Lord Nesaby did not take this casual injury number and divide it to get to this number. Lord Nesaby did something completely different. Lord Nesaby went through all the other dispatches that are available to him as a Lord of the British House of Lords. He has access to documents and Right of Information Act, and he looked at all the other dispatches from the British High Commission in Colombo during the time, and he came to that conclusion. So you see that this number is completely consistent. And then I have looked at the error bars in all these calculations, and I published that in the Island article 26 July 2019, and I find that the credible number is in fact about 7,000 and not the extremely exaggerated numbers used by Mr. Thanikasalam without any research. So before that, I want to show you, oh, I don't see that. Well, anyway, let me summarize. MPP Thanikasalam's Bill 104 is ultra-virus. In other words, it is not legitimate for him to bring up the law in the legislature because the legislature has no power to investigate such a claim because it's a law. It's only the federal government, and the federal government can only, because it's an international issue, federal government can only ask the UN or the International Criminal Court to investigate. So it's ultra-virus. Bill 104 is factually wrong because the numbers claimed and so on are rejected by Tamil political parties and by Tamil intellectuals. It promotes ethnic dissension. It's an affront to the Aboriginal people's genocide. It imports to Canada the divisive ethnic politics back home that immigrants wish to escape. Bill should be rejected in toto. So now I seem to miss a few view graphs, but I have view graphs from the I had view graphs from the International Red Cross, which pointed out how much food was sent to these people. And one of the claims made by Mr. Thanikasalam is that not enough food was sent to the people who were in the Vanni during the time, and that this was an act of genocide. In fact, the LTTE prevented any food being sent, and the Mr. Thanikasalam's claim is based on the amount of food that is was supposed to have been sent, that is mentioned in the Darusman report. But the Darusman report does not include the amount of food that was sent by the World Food. There's a World Food Fund and by the International Red Cross. If we include those amounts, the amount of food sent is in fact far more, in fact, a factor of 4 times more than the amount sent to corresponding UN refugee camps. So that claim is also wrong. So I want to say that because of all these reasons, the bill should be rejected in toto. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chandre Dharma-wardana, for that well thought of and well tabulated presentation. We saw articles spanning from media, research studies, as well as other authors that you have included in your presentation. We have a few questions from the floor, and one asks, is this an attempt to rewrite history in an untruthful way?
Well, I think you know, when you claim that there has been a genocide which has killed 146,000 people, and if this is going to be taught in schools, then certainly I believe it is an attempt to rewrite the history and also to legitimize this claim through the back door without going through an investigation, without going through the United Nations, and without going to the International Criminal Court. And indeed, if the Mr. Thanigasalam and others could go through those legitimate means of the UN and the International Criminal Court and prove that such a genocide has happened, then I think they have every right to, take the government of Sri Lanka to task and put this in front of the people. But this has not been done. If they do that, I will support them. If they don't do it, I think they are doing the wrong thing. And it is an affront to, it is rewriting history. And indeed, rewriting history by ignoring equally important historical things, historical narratives important to Canada, like that of the Aboriginal genocide, which has now been established by a commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dharma-wardana. And would you mind commenting on, there were different totals tabulated by the 3 levels of government, one with 100,000 from